Something shifted in the air when Lorraine Warren entered a room, something people couldn't quite name but could always feel. And in the 6 decades she spent investigating cases of demonic infestation and supernatural oppression, that unnamed quality saved countless families from forces they could not have confronted alone. The story of Lorraine Warren's clairvoyant gift is not the story of a carnival psychic or television personality seeking attention through dramatic claims, but rather the quiet, disciplined account of a woman who discovered at 7 or 8 years old that she could perceive colored auras surrounding every person she encountered, and who spent the rest of her life applying that gift to the investigation of genuine evil. She kept her ability secret through childhood, fearing how her family would respond to the knowledge that their daughter could see things invisible to ordinary perception, carrying the weight of that private awareness until she met a teenage boy named Ed Warren, who had his own history with the paranormal and who would become her partner in both life and the work that would define them both. Ed had grown up in a house he described as genuinely haunted, and his early experiences gave him a framework for understanding what Lorraine described, creating between them a partnership in which her direct psychic perception and his systematic documentation protocols would complement each other across thousands of investigations. When the Warrens arrived at a location to investigate reports of supernatural activity, Ed designed his approach to preserve the integrity of Lorraine's impressions by giving her only minimal information before she performed her initial walkthrough, wanting her perceptions to arise from direct contact with the space rather than from suggestions planted by prior testimony. This methodological discipline was something both Warrens took seriously, because Lorraine's psychic impressions held their greatest value precisely when they emerged independent of the documentary knowledge Ed had accumulated through interviews and research, providing confirmation when they aligned with historical findings and pointing toward hidden dimensions when they revealed information the documents did not contain. Upon entering an affected location, Lorraine would open her perception to whatever the space contained, moving through rooms in a state of heightened receptivity and dwelling in areas where impressions were strongest, actively directing her attention to gather specific qualities of information about any presences she encountered. She sought to determine whether an entity was intelligent or merely residual, to assess its approximate age and origin, to understand its relationship to specific individuals in the household, and most critically to identify whether the presence was human in origin or something far more dangerous. In the Perrin farmhouse investigation that would later become widely known through its adaptation in film, it was Lorraine who identified the specific quality of the primary entity before any documentary research had confirmed her impression, determining through direct psychic contact that the haunting was not a simple residual echo, but a deeply intentional malevolence connected to historical figures associated with the property. In the case of Annabelle, the Raggedy Ann doll that nursing students believed contained the spirit of a trapped child, Lorraine's immediate impression upon encountering the object provided the critical reframing that changed everything about how the case would be handled, stating with absolute certainty that what the students perceived as a child's spirit was actually an inhuman intelligence in deliberate disguise. Her assessment in that case was not arrived at through physical examination of the doll or analysis of the testimony, but through direct psychic perception of the quality of presence attached to the object, and her conclusion that the entity was demonic rather than human determined the entire course of the intervention that followed. During the Glatzel possession case in Connecticut, Lorraine was present for multiple exorcism sessions and provided real-time impressions of the entity's responses to the prayers and commands of the officiating clergy, information that the priests used to calibrate the intensity and direction of their spiritual warfare. This real-time intelligence during active exorcism proceedings was perhaps Lorraine's most unique contribution to the resolution of cases that tested the limits of available spiritual resources, transforming the exorcism right from a linear procedure into a responsive, adaptive encounter. She would monitor what she described as the entity's attempts to find gaps in the protective spiritual barrier established by the clergy. Perceiving moments when an entity apparently withdrawing before one approach would concentrate its resistance in a specific part of the space that the ceremony had not yet directly addressed. And she would communicate these observations to the priest so the rite could be redirected before the entity could consolidate a secondary position. The gift that made Lorraine Warren the most effective clairvoyant investigator of her generation also exposed her to dangers that purely analytical investigators did not face, because direct psychic contact with powerful adversarial entities was not passive observation but active engagement. Ed Warren was acutely aware of this dimension of the work and treated the protection of Lorraine's psychic well-being as a primary investigative responsibility, ensuring that a priest was present at every significant investigation and that formal prayers of protection prescribed by Catholic tradition were offered before Lorraine entered any seriously affected space. He never asked her to engage more deeply than she herself assessed as safe, but there were cases where the intensity of what she perceived during active engagement with powerful entities produced effects that lingered after the investigation concluded. Lorraine referenced the Snedeker investigation in Southington and the Glatzel exorcism sessions among the cases that left her with nightmares and a residual quality of darkness at the edges of her perception that required sustained prayer, and in the most extreme cases, the ministration of a priest to fully resolve. In the Snedeker investigation, Lorraine's initial impression of the Southington house as the site of the most concentrated demonic presence she had encountered since Amityville arose before the family had completed their account of the experiences that had driven them to seek help, emerging from direct contact with the space itself rather than from suggestion generated by testimony. This sequence of impression before information was the methodological discipline that gave Lorraine's contributions their investigative integrity, and it was Ed Warren's deliberate design that preserved this sequence across decades of active work. The cross-case consistency of her impressions, the frequency with which her psychic assessments were subsequently confirmed by documentary research or physical evidence, or the testimony of witnesses who had not yet shared their full accounts, constitutes a body of evidence that those who approach the Warren record honestly find difficult to dismiss as coincidence or performance. Lorraine Warren was not a performance psychic, did not conduct demonstrations for audiences, did not offer readings for entertainment, and did not monetize her abilities beyond their application to the investigation work that defined her life. The gift was, in her own words, given to her for a specific purpose, and she applied it to that purpose with complete dedication across 6 decades of active investigation that began in the modest community cases of the early New England Society for Psychic Research years, and continued through the landmark investigations of the 1970s and 80s. She could perceive the colored auras surrounding individuals and interpret their meanings, could sense the character and intent of invisible presences, could identify the moments during exorcism ceremonies when entities shifted their resistance from one location to another, and could assess with remarkable accuracy whether a haunting was the residual echo of past trauma or the active oppression of an intelligent, malevolent force. After Ed Warren's passing in 2006, Lorraine continued to consult on cases led by Tony Spira and the continuing NESBR operation, contributing to investigations until her health no longer permitted active engagement. The discipline she had maintained throughout her investigative career, the refusal to sensationalize or commercialize her gift beyond its application to helping families in genuine crisis, and the methodological integrity she and Ed had designed to ensure her impressions remained uncontaminated by suggestion, all reflected an understanding that what she carried was not entertainment, but responsibility. She passed away on April 18, 2019, in her Monroe home, surrounded by family and those who had worked alongside her for decades, and the gift she had carried since childhood departed with her into whatever awaited beyond the boundary that she more than most had spent her life studying. The investigations continue in the hands of those she trained and the records she left behind. But the particular quality of direct psychic perception that Lorraine Warren brought to the work of confronting genuine evil remains the most difficult dimension of the Warren legacy to replace and the most significant to understand. Hashtags Paranormal Investigation Ed and Lorraine Warren, clairvoyant abilities, demonic haunting, true horror stories, supernatural documentary, Warren Files, ghost hunting, psychic medium, real exorcism, haunted history, paranormal research, Vanishing Roads, dark history, true supernatural. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented paranormal case files. All events reference real investigations by Ed and Lorraine Warren.